Hey everyone, welcome to another episode from Ampro Engineering. This is a Tamiya Blackfoot, quite possibly one of the most iconic Tamiyas ever made. This body has found itself on quite a number of their cars, as well as a lot of custom builds. It lends itself well to that because the body is highly detailed with really excellent accessories. There are a few variants of this car from Tamiya. If you did want to go with a smaller wheeled version and want to look more scale, you could either get the SRB version, which was the first car that this body was developed for. Unfortunately, that car suffers from the wrong front suspension, the wrong rear suspension, a terrible body mounting design, an incredibly flimsy and rudimentary chassis because it's an old design. So it can be forgiven for having a pretty rudimentary and basic chassis system, but overall, it's really lacking in that scale realism for a Ford F-Series. Now the alternative is to take this body and this chassis and simply do a few modifications, and you've got this. Now this chassis was originally a Brat. In fact, it still is the Brat, but I use it quite often with this shell, and it does give you a much more scale appearance. And for me, I think it actually works better than the SRB because it has proper rear suspension, not that camber gain type due to its swing arm rear suspension. It will also give you a differential. You've got better front suspension. But again, the tires do stick out quite considerably. And like a lot of these early cars from Tamiya, this chassis, it does suffer from some minor issues like the front tires stick out more than the rear tires, which actually is better for off-road performance. But if you're trying to go scale, it's still a little bit tougher. I've seen a lot of these builds where people will use a CC01, but again, the CC01 is a much larger chassis, and this is a fairly small body. So what are we to do if we want something that looks like this on a scale chassis? Well, my friends, I have a solution. This is a Thunder Tiger Toyota Hilux. It is a 1/12 scale model. The exact same version of this is made by Associated. It just has, ironically, a body similar to this on it, but it's much smaller. When this came out, I kind of had a hunch, and after I noticed the wheelbase and the wheel track, I knew I was onto something. So we're gonna take this body, and we're just not going to use it. You have to make one minor modification to the chassis, which I've done already, and that is to lengthen it by a total of 20 millimeters. Now, it's actually quite easy to do. It is possible, yes, to chop the chassis and stretch it out, but we're not going to do that because that reduces the structural integrity of what is already kind of a, not the strongest chassis. Instead, what I did is I took out all four of these links and I replaced them with this M3 threaded rod. This one is a high-grade stainless steel, and I simply measured the original rods and added 20 millimeters to each of them. Then to make them look a little more presentable, I simply slid a stainless steel tube over them. Once I figured out what the ball end to ball end central length was, and we were done. This entire upgrade took 45 minutes. I also decided to drill out the captured ball end because the original links had an M2.5 threaded shank on the end, and these are M3, so I just drilled that out with a 2.5 millimeter bit. I then tapped it with an M3 and we were all set. Again, this is what I did. You may want to do something a little bit more robust. We're going to get to the axle in a minute, but first we're going to start with the body mounts. What I want to do initially is just give you an idea how this looks. This is a standard Blackfoot body, and if I simply park it on top, once I have stretched the wheelbase, you can see, I'm just going to try and eyeball it here, you can see that the wheelbase is spot on. On top of that, we turn it around like so. Again, I apologize, this body is quite in poor condition. The wheel track fits right alongside of the body. It is nearly perfect. This means in order to mate these two together, we're going to need some body mounts. Step one, remove all four of these body mounts. All four of the original body mounts have been pulled, and now we can install the adapter ones. So this is the rear body mount. This has been painted black. These will come white in nylon. So we're going to drop these in, and they should be pretty snug because we don't want them to flop around or anything. And there's the rear, and here is the front. Now please note the orientation, but you will find out very quickly if you've installed them backwards. All these screws out here. And unlike many of my other products, you don't have to tap any of these holes because these screws are designed to pass through them as they thread into this inside wall on the existing body mount. So we'll just place them here and then set the body on it. Now the reason we're doing it this way is because we want to make sure that the ride height is correct. Again, these are adjustable. So it should plop right on there. There's the front, and there's the rear, and there we have it. It's simple as that. So no modifications required to your body, no modifications required to the chassis. You want to gauge your ride height as well. My recommended setting is in the middle hole on the front and on the rear. And at this height, you get a pretty standard stance where if you fully compress everything, there's really no rubbing on the body. There's really no rubbing on the body. If you do want to lower it slightly or raise it, which I suspect you probably want to put bigger tires on it if you'd like, you do have that option. When you figure out what height you want, pull the body mounts out. And as I mentioned before, these only have 3. You'll see 5 on the ones that you order. These are not through holes. And the reason for that is I wanted to increase rigidity. And if these were all through holes, then it'd be a little bit more susceptible to breakage. When you figure out what height you want the body at, drill out the hole all the way through so that your screw will pass through there and lock the body mount into place. Use a 2.5 millimeter drill bit. Do not, under any circumstances, use anything larger. You will weaken the body mounts. So I drilled out the lower one on these, and again, the production ones are going to have 5, and you'd want to drill out the middle one if you want the stock. Well, I guess there's no such thing as stock. What I have determined to be a pretty standard position, so we'll just push that in there like that. And then remember that these screws will just slide straight through. Same thing. For me, I drilled out what will be the middle ones on the production version. Slide those straight in. When threading them back in, make sure that you back thread first. You don't want to start to cross thread these and screw up the threads. The stock front bumper isn't going to work, so that's got to come out. The same with the stock rear bumper. That's not going to work any longer. And you'll notice on the front body mount, there are these 2 little posts here. The hood of the Blackfoot has a slight downward slope. And what I did not want is all of the load of the body to be placed right here, because obviously it cantilevers the weight forward off of the body mounts, and I don't want to like start to bend anything. So I've made these bosses a little bit taller because I've seen a lot of these bodies, including this one and a couple others that I have, as well as one that's going to go on this, where the body is cracked right here and people tend to reinforce them. So my concern was if you have some kind of reinforcement doubler on the inside surface right here, that this body mount wouldn't fit. This way you have 2.5 millimeters that you can cut off of this to make sure that the body sits evenly on these 2 posts, wherever that you've sanded them to, or if you want to cut them off completely and make sure that it sits on this area and goes through the body mount hole as well. The rear is a little different because the rear is completely flat. So here it's designed for the rear body to sit flat on the 2 posts, distributing any downward force directly onto the post, and these body mounts here are there simply to keep the body in place. So you can see that the body fits pretty evenly here. There was a little bit of give and take because obviously you wanted it so that the front would sit properly when the front end was pushed down and when the back was pushed down and when the whole thing was pushed down. You didn't want anything moving too much, and then you wanted it to look even when the vehicle was at rest as well. So it's a little give and take. If you did want to make any kind of fine-tuning adjustments, you're more than welcome to. But I think this just about got the body to sit pretty darn even, and I'm really happy with how it looks. The body that this truck is going to get is this one here. These aren't the body mounts that this truck is going to get. Not because anything's wrong with these body mounts, it's because something's wrong with the truck. The previous owner had just monumentally drilled out these holes, so they're huge. This is around 7 millimeters in diameter, and the same with the rear body mount. So we're gonna have a special print for this particular truck, so they're a lot larger. What's really cool too is that I want to put my interior in this. And if we very carefully lift this up, we can see that once we move the ESC, we should have no problem putting in the full Ampro interior, which this truck doesn't have right now. I have made a little extension. I have no faith in this, as I don't think that it's going to successfully be capable of all this torque. But I think for the time being, when you are building this truck, if you do in fact want to go down that path, it will get the truck running until you can find a drive shaft that is maybe more appropriate to your application. So you'll take the drive shaft and you will slide it right into the main body like that. I'm going to put a little dab of shoe glue here because that stuff you can always peel off later on. So just put it right in there. And on this side here, I'm going to go ahead and trim about 2 millimeters off the end of this. That will make it have just enough clearance. Right now, it might very well fit, but it seems that it's going to be super, super, super close to this. In fact, I think it's just going to bind up. So we'll just trim off a tiny bit off the end. Again, about 2 millimeters. When you do trim this, just make sure it's nice and smooth because any burrs on this will cause it to bind. So the drive shaft is in. And again, all the part numbers to these and all the links will be in the description. And that is it. This was a really easy installation. I'm glad it went as well as it did. In fact, I did the entire design in about 20 minutes, and what you're looking at here is around 2.5 hours worth of work. For me, the result of that little outlay is just ridiculous. In fact, it's almost like this has been designed for it. If we spin the car around, you can see that the steering servo, flip it over, can you see how close the servo is? There's a 2mm gap between the servo arm and the front bumper. It is like Thunder Tiger had originally designed this for this body, not for the version that Associated has. I mean, for this Tamiya Ford F150 ABS body. Really came out spectacular, and I cannot be happier. Man, even the rock guards, or actually I should say the running boards, now look like rock guards. They are perfectly flush along the side of the body. I mean, again, the fitment here is pretty insane. We should have some more upgrades for this. I want to do a front bumper, maybe a trailer hitch or something of that nature for the back of this. And we're definitely going to swap the wheels out with something a little more period correct. But I hope this video was enjoyable for you. I know for me, I've always wanted to have something like this. So this has been a project that I really, really like to do. Thank you for sitting through this video, and we'll see you next time.